Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Hello and welcome to this video. Hope everyone's having a good time, enjoying themselves and having fun in the world. This video is another rambling Gen X perspective video, and it's today I'm going to be looking at some of the literature I grew up on. And some of the literature that I've encountered through my life. Comic books, literature, different writers in both of those fields. I grew up as the video would suggest Gen X. Comic books and whatever I can convince my mom to have around the house to let me read was what I read. As I've said in past videos, my main literary diet growing up was science fiction, with some outliers in different genres, a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of everything else. Before I go any further, I need to also say that these Gen X videos that I do are inspired by the wonderful people that do the shorts and the reels and stuff on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. They do wonderful work, and hopefully I can remember to put links to their respective things in the description below. Hopefully I have the brain power to do that. I grew up, like I said, I grew up on a diet of Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, Frank Herbert, Alan Dean Foster, in that particular category. I also read some Tolkien growing up. Not a whole lot. It was not a real big... I enjoy fantasy, but I'm more into spaceships, lasers, warp drives, and stuff like that than I am orcs and dragons and magic. It's just a personal thing. If your thing is fantasy, more power to you. Enjoy it, indulge in it. Simply because I don't care for something doesn't mean anything. It just means I don't care for it. You know, you've got some great fantasy authors out there. George R. Martin, Piers Anthony, McCaffrey, I can't think of her first name, did all the Dragon Riders of Perrin's book. Good authors. I just don't particularly care for that genre of writing. I grew up on comic books. Love comic books. And I am very disagreeable to the whole concept of this polar thing of either you're a DC fan, an independent fan, or Marvel fan. That I found to me, that is abhorrent to be so consumed, so blind to other things out there. I like a little bit of DC, I like a little bit of Dark Horse, Marvel, and a whole variety of independent comic book writers out there that I can't think of the name of the publishers. It's all in what I'm looking for in my comic book entertainment. DC writes a lot of fantasy. They have things like, you have Gotham City, Metropolis, Central City, and so on and so forth, where a majority of your superheroes live. Whereas in Marvel, it's more down to earth. They deal with more realistic situations, more grounded. It's a different type of storytelling. It's like the bullshit between you have to be a Star Wars fan or a Star Trek fan. You can be both. It just depends what you're into at that moment. I like both of those, but I digress. However, is it digress or degress? I digress. I don't know. But to get back on topic, the comic books that I mainly grew up on were Batman, Doom Patrol, let's see what else, Daredevil, Green Lantern, characters like Elektra. Always, those were what I was drawn to. And the irony, not really the irony, the growing, I guess, of my mind or consciousness, or however you want to look at it, deals with different people have different views, different ways of looking at things. I, for one, depending on what I'm looking for, what I'm in the mood for, is what I read. I can also forgive a weak or poor story if it has excellent art, and vice versa. I can forgive not high quality, marginal artwork if there's a good story to it. I.e. Frank Miller's Daredevil run. The art was good, but it was not near as good as the art in Frank Miller's Elektra Assassin. Both were really, really good stories, and the story in Frank Miller's run on Daredevil is really good. Frank Miller, a lot of his stuff that he did post or pre 2001 September is some of my favorite stories, some of my favorite comic book stories. And these stories and some of his post September 11th 2001 stuff shows the trauma he suffered while looking out of his studio window and watching airplanes fly into buildings. It is, I mean, you can look at everything he did after 2001, you can see and feel the trauma in that writing. I have some of his some of his Dark Knight Returns sequels that he did in the early part of the 21st century, despite the disorganization, despite the clumsiness and stuff, there is something about the underlying nature and knowing of the trauma that he went through watching this live, out a window, that endears the stories to me. They're not the strongest stories in the world, and they're not the most artistic stories. However, the trauma from watching that live as a parent, I think that's what, knowing that is part of why I'm endeared to the stories. You've got a clear-cut post and pre-2001 cut there. A very clear, just boom, change. And it's just, some of the artwork is crazy, and maybe three of the sequels, I know at least one that he did the art and the story, and that art, yeah, it can be traumatizing just looking at it, but it's one of those things that I really, the part of me that wants who wants to get inside the mind of the writer, it's evident. It's laid out there for you. And if you can keep that in mind while you read anything Frank Miller did 2001 to now, you're better able to enjoy the stories. Grant Morrison, love Grant Morrison. I really love Grant Morrison's run on Doom Patrol. And I was really, really excited when the people at Warner did the Doom Patrol show. James Gunn came in here recently and canceled the show, but the show was a very wonderful translation of the written page into live action. And the cast they got for Negative Man, the Flexible Woman, Crazy Jane, Robot Man, and the Chief, that was lightning in a bottle. That cast was awesome. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I know it's streaming on the HBO streaming. I think it's HBO Max, or it was HBO Max, and they changed it here recently. So it's whatever the HBO streaming is. It's very well done. Grant Morrison was brought in to help as a technical advisor, and they did a really great job. But when you get back into Morrison's comics, the run he did on Doom Patrol was just above and beyond. I've got chickens out, so I will be turning my head different ways during this recording. So, Grant Morrison, you got Danny the Street, the I can't think of the name of them right offhand. I looked it up and wrote it all down before I came out here to record and watch chickens. I can't remember the name. There's a whole plethora of things he put into Doom Patrol that were just awesome. And it is well worth a read. It was what he wrote and how he wrote it was so far ahead of its time as far as inclusion and pulling people up and helping people, that if somebody were to read Grant Morrison's run on Doom Patrol, they would swear it would be written in the last 5 or 6, 7 years. But it was written in the 80s. And it was so far ahead of its time. It was just awesome. Jeff Loeb, I think it's Jeff Loeb, his stories, his Batman stories, The Long Halloween and Dark Victory are very good. I enjoy those. The art for those two books are really good. I also really enjoy Jeff Johns' Earth 1 Batman run. I like all of the Earth 1 titles that have been submitted, that have been published so far. The Wonder Woman, they get back to the roots of Wonder Woman. The BDSM, the bisexuality, the lesbianism, and all that, which was at the heart of the original Wonder Woman comics, excuse me. You go back and you pull them up and you read, it's all in the subtext. And it's great. And the Earth 1 series on Wonder Woman, it's right there in your face. I mean, it's put right there in your face. There's no subtext to it. There's nothing they had to hide. Or back in the 30s and 40s in American culture, they had to put it in the subtext because of the social norms then versus the social norms now. The reimagined Earth 1 Teen Titans, or just Titans I believe it's called, is really good. The Earth 1 Green Lantern is just off the charts good. It is more than worth the money to pick up and read it. I mean, it really challenges the norms, even today's norms, and it's great. Now into literature. I was reading books like Stranger in a Strange Land, Foundation Trilogy, Moon is a Harsh Mistress, Dune, 3rd, 4th, 6th, 7th grade. And matter of fact, about once a year from 4th grade through about 8th grade, my mother would be called in for a parent-teacher conference because I'd be caught reading in class, reading one of these books. And the reason why she was called in for a parent-teacher conference wasn't so much that I was reading in class, but when the teacher would question me about the subject matter, evidently I had a really good handle on it for my age. And that really evidently upset the administration of the school for some reason. Especially when you're reading something like Time Enough for Love by Heinlein, which has a lot of fairly graphic sex in it. Stranger in Strange Land it's not graphic, but it's there. It's in your face. Heinlein didn't pull any punches. And it's literature like that. Frank Herbert's Dune. I remember that. I was in the 6th grade when my mom, that was the book they got my mom called in for that one. And that one really set off the administration because of Herbert basing the spice in the Dune novels on the effects of LSD and psilocybin that he evidently used fairly regularly in the 60s and early 70s. So yeah, it's just those things, when you have those grasps at a young age, it just really confuses the piss out of the status quo. And that's me. To this very day, I derive a pleasure out of poking the status quo. The status quo does not like to be messed with. You start fucking with the status quo, you better be ready for the consequences. Mount up on that bad boy, kick it with your spurs, and ride. That's all I can tell you. It is ride that to no end. Then, as I got into high school, I discovered the books written by Dr. Albert Hoffman on LSD, ayahuasca, and things of that nature. I also discovered Terence McKenna, his book Food of the Gods, I think is a must-read for anybody of any kind of intelligence. Hoffman's LSD, My Problem Child, is another one. Those particular authors and the books they wrote on the subjects they wrote on are very worth, even if you have no desire or wanting to experience the elevation that these substances give you. They're still worth reading. Excuse me, gas. I just downed a big soda before I came out here, so I may be burping throughout this video. The nature of the information and everything in it is well worth it. It is. It's great to get the background and the origins of these substances. Somewhere around the 4th or 5th grade is when I stumbled into Hunter S. Thompson. The first book of his I ever read was Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I read several of his other books, a lot of his nonfiction. I prefer and I use the term very, very loosely, nonfiction, because in a lot of ways, Rum Diaries, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas they're fictionalized, but they're very, very loosely nonfiction. In a lot of ways, Rum Diaries, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas they're fictionalized, but they're very, very loosely nonfiction. In a lot of ways, Rum Diaries, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas are, they're fictionalized, reality. So they're fiction, but they're not. It's weird. You'd have to read the books to understand. Now, I think one of my favorite Thompson books came out. It was, matter of fact, it was his very last book that he published, called Kingdom of Fear. In fact, I pull that book down off the bookshelf every time we hit an election year, because that book just reminds me why we vote, how we vote, what we need to look for when we vote. Very worth the time and effort to sit down and read. One of my favorite quotes of Thompson's is from just before he committed suicide. Was, and I'm going to paraphrase because I can't remember the exact wording right offhand, but basically he says, I would never commit suicide. When I die, if somebody tells you it was suicide, politely correct them and tell them that I was murdered by the only man that I feared. And I think that is a very, for what I've learned about Hunter S. Thompson, it's a very accurate quote. It's very accurate to his life and the things that he did in his life. Fear and Loathing in America is also a good set. It's a lot of his collected works through the 70s. And it's Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trails, another really good one. But you can see from a layman's point of view the effects of who and what he did and how he did it, how over the years. His book on the Hells Angels, that book will sober you up quick. That is just a really rude book to read, and it's the book that made him a star, that got his name out there. So yeah, it's wonderful. Who else have I read? Back to comics, Ellis Wyatt's Transmetropolitan, which is basically comic books that have a fictionalized Hunter S. Thompson set in an ambiguous future sometimes. The way these comics are written is, regardless of when you read them, you're going to get the feel that it's the future, but also the present. A lot of what Ellis wrote in those comics were very philosophical, very thought-provoking, and very much something that's going to be relevant. It's my understanding that Wyatt Ellis, maybe Wyatt Ellis, but either way, the human being is not probably the best human being in the world, but he's one hell of a writer. He did comic runs for both DC and Marvel that are worth checking out. He did some Batman titles. I believe he did some X-Men titles and that stuff too. It's very, it's kind of a cynical, philosophical view of things going on and around life. Just had a big old red-tailed hawk fly over, and no wonder the chickens all ran into the coop. But I'm getting off topic. No, it's I've recently started a book called The Omnivore's Dilemma. Got to think about how talking. Sometimes my train of thought gets faster than my mouth, and there's a disconnect, and I've got to. That's one of the reasons why I have these pauses in my videos, is because I have to stop and slow my brain down. But it is what it is. So these things that this type of literature goes, it makes you think about things. I'm probably a good bit into the first section of Omnivore's Dilemma, and he's talking about corn and how we use corn, how corn is basically in everything. The shine we get off linoleum, a lot of the like sealants and stuff we use are made from corn or have corn in them. A lot of the foods we eat have corn or some part of the corn plant in them. And it's interesting. It's just what we've done as a species and how we've broken our symbiotic role with nature. McKenna in Food of the Gods talks about that if you step outside of our symbiotic relationship, it starts to break down. When you start to put yourself above that, one of my favorite George Carlin quotes is, "The planet's okay, humans are fucked." And that's basically what these books are saying. Hoffman, in his book LSD, My Problem Child, does the same thing. He touches on it. Doesn't go in as heavy as McKenna. And I can't think of the name. Here, let me look it up real quick. Ha ha ha. Phone. Love it. Gotta let it load. Do, 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 do. Let's see. Yeah, Michael Pollan. Michael Pollan wrote Omnivore's Dilemma. And he looks at, in the book, he looks at the problems our ancestors had on making decisions what to eat, and how it's not too far off from the decisions we have to make in modern days on what we put into our bodies. And it's fascinating. It's one of those things that we as a species need to start looking at, start thinking about. I was out earlier today running errands. It was 105 degrees outside, and the heat index was like 112, 113. I mean, when you're having weeks upon weeks of temperatures like that, you need to start figuring out what we're doing and why we're doing it, and is it really beneficial for us to do stuff like that. And that's where I'm going to leave that, because I don't want to turn this into a climate change video. I'll do that some other day. But it's more of the symbiosis we have with not only nature and the earth itself, but with other human beings. We have made it so easy in my life, at least my 53 years scuttling around this planet, to kick down at things that are different than you are. We need, in my opinion, to get away from that. We need to learn to pull people up, bring people up, boost people, and look at the forces that keep trying to tell us that kicking down is what we need to do. We need to look at the people that are telling us to kick down. The reason why they do that is because they don't want us, the common average everyday person, to understand that they're fucking us at every turn, so that they keep us divided. We don't have the ability to unite and hold them accountable. And that's what a lot of it is they don't want to be held accountable. So that's one of the reasons why I think reading, and I don't care what you read fantasy, you read science fiction, you read contemporary, classics, whatever, those elements, those themes can be found by the good authors. People like Victor Hugo, Ernest Hemingway, F. Fitzgerald Scott. All of these people, Dante, you go back and you can look at it, and those themes are there. That wanting to be better as a whole, not as an individual, but as a whole. Individuality is something that we should cherish, and we should encourage individuality. But at the same time, an intelligent individualist knows when it's to his or her benefit, or they, his, her, they, we, us. All of those pronouns benefit. And it works. We need to start embracing things that people have told us for thousands of years, or at least 2,000 years. And also, we shouldn't elevate ourselves simply because you happen to know more on a subject than somebody else, or you're better at doing something. What I feel you should be doing is trying to bring people up to your level, then together maybe move up to the next level as a group, help each other. There's a quote, and I can't remember who said it, that says, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I agree with that very, very strongly. I love people that are smarter than I am, people that got views that are different than mine. It's just one of those things that I really, really like. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video here. And until next time, peace.